Okay, welcome everybody to the Region 6 Zoom webinar for tonight. And tonight's topic is mental health. So we're really excited to welcome everyone here. And please be patient with us as we kind of sort our way through this. We have a great topics and I'm looking forward to hearing from all the panelists. The screen showed a few minutes ago, but I'll go through again who's going to be on the webinar tonight. So we have Dr. Elizabeth Barrett, child and adolescent psychiatrist, and Dr. Stephanie Hayes, psychologist, and we have Lisa Caricato, mental health educator, and also, sorry, my screen keeps switching around on me, and also certified instructor in a number of well-known mental health programs. And also on the call or on the Zoom tonight, we have Ken Steinbrenner and Nat Rondeau, who are your other two executive board members for Region 6. And you will see someone up there occasionally, and that's who we're calling our ghost host for the night because we're new to doing webinars. We recruited actually a classmate of Nat and mine from Labour College, Chris Naden from IATSE Local 58, and he's going to be doing some of the co-hosting and helping out with us in some of the settings as we get used to the system. So we appreciate everybody's patience. And for those of you that, there was a lot of names that I didn't recognize, which is a good thing, that registered for today. So I just wanted to just give a very, very brief summary of how we got to this point tonight, because I think it's important for people to understand the process and how important it is for people to be communicating with their local presidents and leadership. So we've been doing Zoom webinars with the area councils since the pandemic started. As board members, we've been meeting with local leadership, and at the last meeting, in fact, I think it was the very last meeting, we were at an area council and had a very difficult conversation with some of the local leaders, some local presidents around the mental health pieces that their members are experiencing and also dealing with friends and family members. And the question was posed, is there anything else that we can do as a union to support our members? Yes, we negotiate EAP benefits. Yes, we do those pieces, but what else as a union should we or could we be doing? And that's how this sort of came about, was we wanted to provide another support to our membership. And so we kind of, the three board members talked with these local leaders. We kind of came up with an idea, and then we went to our equity leaders and we asked them what they thought about it and their feedback and their ideas. And so we came up with tonight's event. So I really want to thank our local leaders, our presidents, for stepping up and speaking to us about their concerns, and also our equity leaders for supporting and assisting us in tonight's event. So thank you to everyone. And with that, I'm going to punt it over to Brother Ken Steinbrenner, who's going to read the statement of respect.
Thank you, Tara. Harassment and discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated at OPSEU functions. Whenever OPSEU members gather, we welcome all peoples of the world. We will not accept any unwelcoming words, actions, or behaviors against our union members. We accord respect to all persons, regardless of age, creed, political affiliation, and racialization, including, and not limited to, people of African descent, Black, Caribbean, South Asian, women, men, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples, members of ethno-racial groups, people with disabilities, gays, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, transsexual people, and gender-diverse persons, francophones, and all persons whose first language is not English. In our diversity, we will build solidarity as union members. If you believe you are being harassed or discriminated against, contact Tara Maskahevich or myself for immediate assistance.
Helps if I unmute. Aucune forme de harcèlement ou de discrimination ne sera tolérée aux activités du SEFPO. Au SEFPO, chaque fois que nous nous rassemblons, nous souhaitons la bienvenue à tous les peuples du monde. Nous n'acceptons aucun geste, parole ou comportement indésirable dirigé contre les membres de notre syndicat. Nous témoignons du respect à toutes les personnes, quel que soit leur âge, leurs croyances, leur appartenance politique, de caractère racial, y compris, mais sans s'y limiter, aux peuples d'origine africaine, noire, des Caraïbes, sud-asiatiques et asiatiques, aux femmes, aux hommes, aux peuples des Premières Nations, Métis et Inuits, aux membres des groupes ethno-raciaux, aux personnes handicapées, aux personnes gays, lesbiennes, bisexuelles, transgenres, transsexuels et de genres divers, aux francophones et à toutes les personnes dont la langue maternelle n'est pas l'anglais. Dans notre diversité, nous renforcerons notre solidarité à titre de membre de notre syndicat. Si vous estimez avoir été victime d'harcèlement ou de discrimination, vous pouvez communiquer avec Tara Maskevich ou avec Ken Steinbrenner pour de l'aide immédiate. And I'm just going to scroll through to the next part, which is our land acknowledgement. We will begin the Region 6 mental health discussion by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Aboriginal peoples who have been stewards of this place. In particular, we acknowledge that OPSEU SEFPO Region 6 includes the Treaty 9 territory and the traditional territory of the Cree, Moose Cree, Ojibwe Chippewa, Oji Cree, Meshiggawak Cree, Algonquin, the traditional territory of the Nipissing First Nation and Anishinaabe, covered by the Robinson-Huron and Upper Canada treaties, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, and the Atikameksheng Anishinaabe, also covered by the Robinson-Huron Treaty. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to our region. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening our communities in particular, and our province and country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous people must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities, and in particular, to bring justice for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls across our country.
Thank you, Nat. So what we're going to be doing is having 3 presentations, and then time permitting, we'll be taking questions. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a question and answer tab. So we won't necessarily be answering them in live time immediately, but each of the panelists will do their presentation, and then we'll try to get to some of the questions, again, time permitting, because they have really valuable information. So I think that we really need to make sure we make time for that. So I hope everyone is understanding. So I'd like to start by introducing our first presenter, Dr. Elizabeth Barrett. Dr. Barrett is a child and adolescent psychiatrist who has practiced medicine in Northern Ontario since 1990. She completed her psychiatry training at the University of Ottawa in 2008, returning to Sault Ste. Marie, where she set up a practice at Group Health Centre as a child and adolescent psychiatrist. Dr. Barrett also worked in the inpatient child and adolescent mental health unit, the CAP unit at Sault Area Hospital from 2008 to 2013. Prior to becoming a child and adolescent psychiatrist, Dr. Barrett practiced family medicine at the Group Health Centre in Sault Ste. Marie for 13 years. Dr. Barrett retired from her psychiatric practice in 2018 and now provides education to children's mental health agencies. Her current interests include helping parents and caregivers support the mental health of their children using the principles of emotion-focused family therapy, yes, and Dr. Barrett lives on St. Joseph Island on the beautiful shore of Lake Huron. Her and her husband have 3 grown children and 2 grandchildren who live in Ottawa. And I've worked with Dr. Barrett for a number of years, and I absolutely love this presentation, and I'm thrilled that she agreed to do this tonight. So thank you and welcome, Dr. Barrett.
You are more than kind, Tara. Thank you. That's a lovely introduction. Just give me a moment here. I'm hoping I can make this work. I'm not that skilled at this, so I'm hoping, yep, there's my presentation. Okay. So, okay. So my presentation is entitled Riding the Waves of the Pandemic, because it does kind of feel like that's what we've been doing, because there's been ups and downs. And so I'm in this brief time I have to talk, I'm going to talk about the stages of emotional response to disasters. Now, the pandemic would be considered a disaster, a global disaster, because it's something unexpected that we've all had to suddenly deal with. I'm going to have a brief discussion of the brain's emergency reaction system, talk a little bit about balanced thinking and self-compassion. So I don't need to go in much detail on my first slide here, because I think we all know very well as adults that we've faced a challenging balancing act in the midst of this global disaster, with all the things we've had to balance at home, as well as either working from home and homeschooling, or risking exposure to COVID-19 in our workplaces, looking after elderly parents, without our usual adult social supports. Our self-care routines have been disrupted, and of course we're still facing a future that is uncertain. So we all are sort of in that same place, and there are many next waves that we have yet to face, given the ongoing financial concerns. And I think right now a big concern is moving from being quite physically distanced and social distance to now we're being asked to go back out in the world, send our children back to school, return to workplaces. So there's a lot going on. And in the meantime, we have this continued media exposure to everything that's going on in countries that maybe are less fortunate than us. We've been pretty lucky here with regard to the pandemic, but we do get exposed to a lot of negative. So really, if you could take anything from this talk, it's that we are human, and of course we're overwhelmed at times. Of course we feel that we've just got too much on our plates, and how would anyone not feel difficulty balancing physical and emotional needs with the needs of our family and jobs? Of course we feel this way, and we've had to struggle to adjust to what is really a new normal, and we don't even know what the next part of new normal is going to look like. And so the first is to accept that of course we're going to have emotional reactions. It's perfectly expected, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think if we can accept emotions in that way, it really helps us to suffer less. So there are two researchers by the name of Zune and Myers who have looked at emotional responses to disasters. And they talk about 6 stages that most people go through. It's similar to what you may have heard about with the stages of grief. So the majority of people who survive disasters experience patterns of temporary disaster reactions that resolve over time. And that's the key, is most people's reactions are temporary. There are people who have more prolonged mental health symptoms as a result of disasters, but that percentage is quite small. And of course, people with pre-existing mental health problems may have more difficulty. But most of us will ride the waves and come out the other side. Of course, anxiety and fear we would absolutely expect in this kind of situation, but people also experience sadness, grief, anger, and other reactions as well. And I think even for those of us who haven't really been faced with the horrible part about this whole pandemic, the illness, people dying, people in hospital dying without someone around, just the things that healthcare workers have to face, and people who work in the healthcare field in all manner. So this is called vicarious trauma, though. We are indirectly affected by all of that because of our repeated exposure to media coverage. So it's something to keep in mind that we can all experience some trauma from this. So this graph is a little busy with the colors, but the only way I could retrieve it from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's an American website, and they have an excellent section on disasters. And so I retrieved this from there. So I apologize for the colors, but really what I'd like you to look at is on the far left, the vertical axis talks about, on the bottom, emotional lows, and on the top, emotional highs. And then the green line on the bottom, the horizontal line, is depicting time. So when we start out before a disaster, you can see that sort of, I don't know what that is, a red line, I guess, is sort of in the middle between emotional high and emotional low. And then you see that when that's sort of the pre-disaster phase, but you see that when we start to get a warning that things might be coming, you can see where the emotions start to go lower, right? And then at the time of impact, when the actual disaster occurs, of course, it goes even lower. So I kind of think that perhaps if we look at our place where we're at, we had warnings about a pandemic coming. We saw what was going on in China. They were shutting down there. And I guess it felt kind of far away. And then it started to come a little closer. And then the impact was, I'm going to say, when all of a sudden we had to shut down. It just was like, okay, that's it. We're shutting down. So then after that, and I'm going to go through this in more detail, there's sort of this heroic phase and the honeymoon phase where actually the emotions rise higher, and then they dip right down in the disillusionment phase, and gradually over months to years, the reconstruction occurs and people are back to normal. I don't want this to be negative when I'm talking months to years. I don't think necessarily we're all going to have months to years, but this is looking at a lot of disasters like hurricanes, mass shootings, that sort of thing. So of course the reconstruction would be a little longer. So let's start with the phase one, which is pre-disaster. And this is a time of fear and uncertainty. We're hearing about things happening elsewhere in the world. It might hit us. So people start to feel vulnerable, a little bit unsafe, like they lack security, they start fearing the future, and there's a feeling of loss of control over what's going on, because a disaster is, that's what a disaster is, something that's sort of out of our human control. And you start to think about the fact that you don't really feel able to protect yourself and your family. So the mood starts to dip a little bit. And then there's impact, and that's when you get the really intense reactions and intense emotions. So things like shock to overt panic. Oftentimes there can be this sort of initial period almost of confusion and disbelief that this is actually happening. And then there's sort of this focus on self-preservation and family protection. And I think, that's when the toilet paper shopping started, because I remember where I was when I heard they're closing the schools tomorrow. It was just before March break. It was March 12th. And I live out at our cottage. So I happened to be in town, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting to the grocery store, man. And you get to the grocery store and everyone was there, and we're all panicking because we're all trying to make sure we have enough food and enough, things that we need to keep us safe. So that's sort of that impact phase. So, again, that's the shutdown. And at that time, we received very powerful messages from government and public health officials that changed our perspective and enabled us to act in a whole new way, because none of us had any of us heard about any of this before, flattening the curve. Like, none of us had even heard this before. So, we were told we have to flatten the curve to prevent the healthcare system from being overwhelmed, and we're going to have to shut down and step away from what we do normally, physically distance with our families, and we had no idea how long it was going to last. So they, the powers that be had to use powerful motivators, and a lot of it was fear. Like, they played into our fears to enforce these new rules, appealed to our sense of community, and there was some shaming going on too in the social media. Oh, you're not listening to this. I saw that person out. So there's a lot of powerful motivators, but also things that can create a lot of a mixture of all kinds of different feelings. So that leads me to talk a little bit about the fact that we have in our brain an emergency response system. It's in our limbic system and the amygdala. And we are born with that because we need a system in our brain to keep us safe from harm. And this system helps us to detect life-threatening danger in our environment. And when danger is detected, our brain goes into red alert. It lights up. And it starts to immediately cause split-second unconscious behaviors. That means we don't plan these behaviors, they happen. And that's where you get into what's called the fight or flight or freeze responses. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. But these are designed to help us to deal with the threat in that moment. And the thing about it is the brain doesn't want us to think too much. Like, the brain just wants us to go immediately into these behaviors. So it overrides the part of our brain that does the thinking and reasoning and planning. That's what we call, those kinds of activities are called executive function. And that happens in the front of our brain in the prefrontal cortex. So that's not working very well. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because it maybe has a little more detail than I want, but the fight response is that you want to stay and fight. So if you see a bear in front of you, you're going to stand up to it and you're going to fight it off. The little words below are how, as humans, we can actually show a fight response when we're not in an actual threatening situation, but I'm not going to spend much time on that now. The flight response is when our brain is telling us, you know what, you're not going to be able to fight this, you better get the heck out of here. And sometimes we have sort of like a malfunction where we actually go into freeze. That's like the deer in the headlights where we just can't act and we just are frozen. So that's sort of what happens at the time of impact. Our danger, our detection system gets lit up and activated. So you can see that we're now sort of, our mood's sort of going down a little bit from all of this, but now we're going to head into what's called the heroic phase, and it's going to make our emotions rise higher, and it's going to hit a peak of what's called the honeymoon phase. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So the heroic phase is where we're kind of like, it's that adrenaline-induced rescue behavior. So like, you know, if you're in a situation where you see someone drowning, it's that, you know, oh, I'm going to go and try to save that person. And we've already got our adrenaline pumping from the fight or flight response. Our muscles are ready to go, and we're going to respond heroically. And of course, there's that feeling of altruism, which means we want to help others. And so in that phase, there tends to be a very high level of activity. Now, sometimes it's kind of what we call low productivity, because remember when I said when the limbic system's activated that the executive function isn't working as well. So you may be kind of running around trying to do something, but you might be less efficient because that part of your brain's not working as well. And I recall being in this phase, the heroic phase, after the pandemic, the shutdown occurred. I suddenly got on all these Facebook groups with other doctors, and I was going to post everything that I could about, how we're going to keep all my friends on Facebook safe and post all this stuff. And I wasn't getting a lot of else done in my life except trying to keep everyone safe with my heroic messages. So, and then you remember on that graph, we kind of hit this next phase where things keep going up. So this is called the honeymoon phase. And this is sort of, okay, we've gone through the heroic phase, and now we're kind of optimistic. Things are going to be okay. And things are going to return to normal quickly. We got this. And the community comes together and bonds. And I remember this very clearly, that we went through this, all of us, because all of a sudden there were all these awesome videos on social media, and people were banding together to help and putting up signs in their windows, and every day at 7 p.m. going out and clapping for the healthcare workers. And it really warmed your heart. It was just a really awesome period of time. But then, then it starts to sink, okay? So then we see that graph, that line, that red line is going straight down with a few little ups and downs at the bottom, but it really starts to head down. And that honeymoon period is kind of not too long, and now we're getting into the longer period, which is the disillusionment phase. And this is when people start to feel discouraged. So communities and individuals realize that there's limits to how the government can help us and keep us safe. And we may feel somewhat abandoned. Any optimism we have starts to turn to discouragement. And don't forget that limbic system's still been active, producing all kinds of stress hormones and stress chemicals. And it starts to produce some negative reactions. And that's where you get into the physical exhaustion, mental health symptoms. You might see people that start to do more substance abuse, drinking and using drugs just because they want to numb out, because this has been going on long enough. And this is the point where we're going to see the increased demand for mental health services. And people actually at this stage are more ready to accept support. Now, again, it says duration is months to years. Now, I just want to remind you that this is coming from other kinds of disasters. We don't really know what's going to happen with this, because we haven't had a global pandemic since the Spanish flu more than 100 years ago. But But as we're going through that disillusionment phase, like there might be some upticks, and then, you know, if you get reminded how bad things are by media coverage or new challenges that you have to face, that'll trigger more feelings of fear, anxiety, sadness, and then you're going to get those ups and downs. So I kind of think that's where a lot of us are right now. I hate to say, but, you know, we've kind of passed that honeymoon phase, and this is kind of, you know, we're heading into this, and we're in this. So we've been in sustained survival mode. Our limbic system's been overactivated for months, and it, of course, would be natural to feel exhausted and worried that we just don't have enough energy to face what we're being asked to face now, which is really this reopening. And I think that's kind of what people might call COVID fatigue. Now, so this next transition, they're saying, okay, you know what, you've done this, we've flattened the curve, now we got to open up, we got to start doing things. But we're now heading into this new phase from a position of greater vulnerability. Like you could see from that graph, we're starting from lower down, as opposed to when you saw in the graph where we started in the middle between emotional highs and lows. Now we're down low. So it's also hard because we're not being told, okay, we're getting back to normal, because there is no normal now. We're being asked to create a whole new normal, and that's kind of scary. So, you know, we were told previously that we had to trust the authorities to move, you know, go home, stay home. Now we're being asked to trust them again to do something that's very different. And it may be harder to feel trusting about that when we have very normal anxiety about our personal and family safety in an uncertain future. So, you know, this is what I just wanted to, and we're not going to talk much about the next phase, which is, they say it's after a year after the event, we have reconstruction. We're not really at that phase, but that's when emotions start to become more positive. People assume responsibility for rebuilding lives, adjusting to the new normal, and coming to terms with what happened, and working through the very real grief that occurs because of so many changes. And during that time, there can be triggers that cause setbacks, but the triggers don't set the emotions as low as before, and they get better quickly. And so we're sort of still at that other stage where we're kind of being asked to do these things that, like, it seems like we're being asked to do things that a while ago we were told was unsafe. So we're kind of bewildered. We're holding different ideas. We're being told to accept things, but we're still got those old ideas in our head. So we're holding opposing ideas in our head. Like, okay, we need to continue some form of social distancing, but I kind of think that's dangerous. So it's like, should we do that, or should we open up the economy? Should we keep control of our own safety, or should we trust the authorities? Should we just focus on self-care and caring for our family, or should we worry about taking care of society by opening up the economy, getting things going? Should we keep our children safe at home, or let them go to school where we're being told that it's more healthy for them, for their development? And don't forget, during all this time, our limbic system's still acting. We feel threatened. Our prefrontal cortex isn't working very well. So our ability to use our executive function isn't working as well. So we can't think and plan as flexibly as we would like to. And this kind of can result in this sort of confusion, or this, what people sometimes go into this when extreme all or nothing thinking. This is sort of like black and white thinking. Well, it's either got to be all this or all that. There's no gray zone in between. So this makes it very difficult to make decisions. So what I'd like to talk just for a moment about is balanced thinking, where it's called walking the middle path if you're into mindfulness and different kinds of therapy, like dialectical behavior therapy. So it's, instead of walking on this path or that path, we're kind of finding the path in between. And we're trying to hold these two sort of what seem like opposite truths in our head at one time and finding a way forward. So, you know, these contradictory truths are standing side by side, but there's some truth in both of them. They don't cancel each other out. So it's sort of understanding that right now there's more than one way to look at our situation and solve the problem. It's not only just one way or just another way. And that's where we get into all this arguing and divisiveness online, where people are disagreeing with each other. And so by learning to sort of walk that middle path, it helps us to become more flexible in our thinking. And it helps us to maybe accept things in a more open way. And it makes changing and moving into this next transition much easier. So it means letting go of extremes, like words that we say, like, oh, well, you know, sometimes people could like wear a mask and it's okay. Whereas, oh, anytime you wear a mask or you don't wear a mask, it's going to turn out bad. Or, using the idea of things can be both and instead of either or. So we can continue some form of social distancing and open up the economy. We can control our safety and trust the authorities. So it's that idea that there's some truth to both of them. It's not black and white, and we can kind of open up a little bit more and be less black and white. I'm going to skip that last slide. It was just about how we're in a better place now, this just a better place than we were making decisions in March. But accept that you are going to be conflicted about the decisions you're being forced to make now, because nobody can guarantee anything. But what causes suffering is that when we have emotions and we won't accept them, we try to suppress them, we try to ignore them. So it's okay to have emotions, is what we do with them. That's the determines how much suffering we have. So be kind to yourself and realize that there are some things you can't control. None of us can predict the future. And if you do make a choice about what to do with your children for school or whatever you decide, you're making the best choice you can with the information you have right now. So I'm going to finish up there. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barrett. That was a really good explanation of the emotional wave that we're all living during this disaster period, and knowing where we've come and how much it can help us navigate and balance the future waves that are coming our way as we hopefully climb out of this. And also, just a friendly reminder that the panelists are providing general information only. If you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please call 911. And if you're looking for mental health services in your area, you can contact 211. Next up, we have Dr. Hayes. Dr. Hayes is a member of Local 684, Algoma Family Services Unit. Dr. Hayes has a PhD in school and clinical child psychology from the University of Alberta, a master's in applied technology from Laurentian University. She's a psychologist at Algoma Family Services, currently completing registration with the College of Psychologists of Ontario. Dr. Hayes is also an adjunct professor in psychology research at Laurentian University. She has extensive experience in supporting the mental health needs of children, youth, and families through assessment, consultation, intervention, and education. Furthermore, she has significant experience in research and program evaluation with an emphasis on families and children with developmental disabilities, the use of technology in education, and creating effective classroom environments. Dr. Hayes has been awarded various scholarships and awards for her work, including the Governor General's Gold Medal. Her current research and clinical interests include building resiliency and capacity in families, youth, children, and professionals, and implementation science, like how to get research into practice and practice into research. Welcome, Dr. Hayes.
Thank you. That sounded very long and boring. I promise, or I hope that I'm not as wordy and boring in my presentation. Let me see if I can get this working. This one. All right, that did not start at the beginning, so just hold on and I will flip quickly to the start. All right, so I am here to speak to you a little bit about self-care. So it dovetails with what Dr. Barrett was already talking about, and she's actually even mentioned a couple of points that I'll come back to. So if you're like me, whenever you hear self-care, you make this face. We hear it a lot, right? Take more time for yourself and you need to do more self-care. And I don't know about you, but right now in this kind of current environment, I really don't feel like I can squeeze out another hour to attend another yoga class or, Zoom meeting, right? A little Zoom fatigued on top of COVID fatigue. However, I hope that I can convince you to do a little bit more for yourself. A recent study came out. They were actually looking at healthcare workers, and they were seeing the same kind of response that Dr. Barrett was talking about, the increased grief and the burnout and compassion fatigue, increase in stress disorders, as well as some more depression, anxiety, and mental health as we kind of continue through this. And we're not used to this pandemic, this kind of crisis that continues and is ongoing. As helpers in particular, we don't tend to share in the same kind of crisis. So usually someone comes to us for support because something's happened. But in this case, we're all experiencing the same kind of crisis. So there's not really a differentiation, which means we're all feeling it. We're all, we're all in this together, but not necessarily from, the helping side. We're also all experiencing it. So it can be even tougher to, have the energy in order to give to other people who are also in need when, you yourself are in need and are feeling burnt out, because we're trying to balance and manage all these multiple roles. So in general, life is like this, right? This kind of up and down, and it really parallels that disaster response. But life in general, we have these expectations that life should be pretty easy, and that, as we roll with things just get easier. Well, how things really are is that there's lots of ups and downs. So as time goes on, we experience all these kinds of peaks and valleys. And pandemic life in particular, I think, at the beginning, that kind of honeymoon phase, right? We all thought we were going to get this time to do all our to-do lists and to check all the boxes, and we would find this amazing balance between work and home life. Our kids would be happy, and they would, do this distance learning thing, no problem. And I remember there's a lot of talk about, learn a new language and all that extra time you have, right? Unfortunately, the reality has been a little different. So the default parent, whichever parent has been, staying home, or both parents staying home, not having jobs, having too many jobs, squeezing everything into one day, has really kind of taken a toll. The idea that, people are now scary and dangerous and we have to, stay away from them is a big shift. Not seeing things on shelves, like Dr. Bear mentioned, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, it's kind of a strange world. And then now moving into the wearing of masks all the time. And we've got, a lot of fear in what we're doing right now. So it's very different than kind of where we thought it was. So I love this cartoon because I feel this a lot, right? I've got this big list. I'm going to get all my paperwork done. I'm going to get my reports caught up, and it's going to be great. Well, how long have we been out? I'm still behind. So you just find other things, or you have these times when you just kind of have a hard time doing anything. And that's that, the deer in the headlights kind of moments that we have. All right. Oh, I love this. Because I don't understand, where all the hand soap has gone, or why people weren't using it before. So I'm not sure if people just have large, hoards in their basements now of soap and toilet paper. But, we are experiencing things in such a different way and very differently than what we kind of thought was going to happen. And it's never ending. So in order to take care of ourselves and to bolster ourselves, put a little more positive in that spin, we talk about self-care and having a self-care action plan. So there's a link there, and I can send out the links and the references later also if you'd like them. It's a short little video, and he's great, and he talks about this 3-step plan. So it's okay to take care. So give yourself permission to do some kind of self-care. Spend some time to figure out what works for you, because we are in a different world and you might have to shift that up a bit. And then really take some time to activate those self-care powers. So I'll come to all these 3 steps and elaborate a little bit more. All right. Why it's okay to take care is because we can have a very depleted battery. If you've ever heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty vessel, it's the same kind of idea. If we're giving to others, taking care of our families, our jobs, our friends, our spouses, all of these different roles that we have, we cannot give if we don't have anything left to give. So that's why it's really important to check in with yourself and figure out kind of where your battery's at, where you're currently feeling. If you're empty, then you got to figure out what's draining you and try to, create a boundary around that and do things then that can fill you up. And at the opposite end, if you're feeling great or good, then what are you doing that's doing so well, that's keeping you feeling that way? And do more of it, because that's fantastic. Often we're kind of, fluctuating in between somewhere, and just spending that time to figure out what we need to make it even just a tiny bit better can move us up, recharge our battery. It's important to also kind of monitor yourself for these signs of burnout. So when things are really impacting you, if it's work related, the Sunday night blues, the night before and you can't sleep and you're tossing and turning because Monday is coming, or that just kind of sense of over complaining about your job or feeling depleted. And this can be not just work related, it can be about any aspect of your life. If something is really popping up for you and it's uncomfortable, sleep is a great indicator of when you're starting to feel this kind of burnout, that overwhelmed, cynical, frustrated, irritability, that quick to losing your temper. So the things that Dr. Barrett was talking about when we're talking about the overactivation of your amygdala to the fight, flight. So when you're, in conflict, those are things to pay attention to. And it's okay to have all those feelings. Again, like Dr. Barrett said, we get sad and angry and upset and frustrated and worried. And these aren't bad feelings at all. These are just feelings. And it's okay to have all the feelings, especially in this strange environment. We may not be someone who typically gets angry when we're out at a grocery store and, have that kind of quick flare up. But this is a different world. And so it's okay to recognize that is impacting us and that we can ask for help and that we can have a bad day and then get back on and have a better day the next day. And we can want some alone time because right now, I don't know about you, but there's very little alone time in my world. Kids are home, partner's home. So it's okay to try and carve out, even if it's 10 minutes. It's okay to also be tired, to not feel like talking, to take a time out. These Zoom meetings I find can be very exhausting. When you spend more time meeting this way, it can be really draining. So it's nice to take a no talking break and setting those boundaries and just kind of saying no when you need to. Kind of already mentioned this, emotions really aren't good or bad. They are just trying to tell us something. So it's important to take that time, whether it's being mindful or just being quiet or journaling. People use all kinds of different strategies, or just stopping to say, what's going on here? What's this feeling really trying to tell me? And then do something about it, like self-care. All right, so what works? There are 7 different types of self-care. It can be physical. Anything as simple as getting a good night's sleep is actually major. Eating healthy, resting, yoga, walking, getting outside. Then there's the emotional side. So whether it's practicing self-compassion, we'll come back to that briefly at the end too. Kindness, social. So having social systems, spending a little bit of time with a friend, even if it is this way, or socially distant in a park. Spiritual. So that can mean not just religious, but spiritual. So yoga, meditation, walking in nature can even fulfill that kind of a need. Personal, so hobbies, spending time, doing things that you really like to do. A cup of coffee, a cup of tea, something as simple as that can fulfill that need. Space, so ensuring a safe, healthy living environment, taking a little bit of time to clean up around you can kind of be one of those self-cares under space. Financial, saving, or splurging. So I like that the 2 are there because, shopping can be good, even if it is online shopping. It's not quite the same. But, that's another one of the types of self-care for some people. And then work. So balancing your time, setting the boundaries, having a positive workspace, spending more time learning, breaks, that stretch break. So things can be really big or really quite small, depending on what you need. So what I suggest is if you don't quite know, or you don't have self-care practices in, more than one of those buckets, you might want to spend some time to do a self-care assessment. There's a lot of ones available online, and I'll get you these links if you would like them later. And that way you can take a look to see what practices you have and what you might want to add, especially because things are different and we can't necessarily do the same kinds of self-care activities we did before. I'm thankful that some of them are opening back up, whether you like to get pedicures or go to the gym, those kinds of things are becoming more available. So, but for some of them, we just can't do, and it's just not the same. So things may never go back to normal, but we can create a new normal, and that's okay. So research actually shows that even spending just 20 minutes a day outside can really improve your mental health. And so this is Whitefish Island. If you haven't been down there for a walk, it's one of my favorite places to go. And it's pretty short, 20-minute walk in nature. I think in the evenings you can often see beavers, which is just, funny. Other things, I love this. This is boring self-care. So these are the small, tiny little things that you can do in a day that actually build up your battery. So going outside, changing your bed sheets, clean sheet night, more often than usual because we're home. Having a nourishing meal, so cooking something maybe that's you didn't do before or something a little healthier. Doing the laundry and putting away, to me, is a tall order. Like, that's a lot of time there. So, maybe break that up and consider that a couple of self-cares. Doing the laundry, folding it, putting away, that's like 3 days of self-care in my house, or 5. Washing your hair, like spending extra time, getting a fancy conditioner, things that you wouldn't typically do. All of that can be self-care. Having a cup of tea or coffee, 10 minutes. So unlike I figured it would take me about an hour and 45 minutes to attend a lunchtime yoga class. So to me, that's just not possible. But you know what? Taking a break and having a cup of coffee for 10 minutes and actually just having a cup of coffee and staring out the window, completely manageable. I like this one too. Just go easy on yourself, and whatever you do today, let it be enough. Call it self-care. And so how to activate those powers. I've got a couple of other ideas here, like self-care bingo. There's a pandemic edition, so you can cross off some of these if you've tried something new. So it's something as easy as validated my emotions, like saying, I was angry, and that's okay. Or I helped someone else, or I binge watched a mindless show, which seems to be something we've done a lot during this pandemic. Including, what was Tiger King? That was the big one at the beginning. Slept in, went for a walk. Like, these are all kind of really, hopefully manageable things. And if they're not, break it down and do something even easier, like wash my hands, click that off. There you go, self-care. There's some other apps online too, or some other websites where you can kind of build your own 30-day self-care challenge. So you push yourself to try something completely different. Some things you might really like and some things you might not, and that's okay, because then you learn what works for you. And then practicing self-compassion. So this was something that Dr. Barrett touched on. And it is self-compassion at its simplest is treating yourself like you would a friend. So often we have this kind of self-critic, this inner voice that can be really hard on us and says things to us that we would never say to a friend. So if you hear yourself like that, I couldn't get enough done today, or how could you not work a full-time job, manage the kids, clean your house, homeschool, like we're just being asked to do too much. And so it's okay not to do that. And we would never tell our friend, why didn't you do more? But we are telling ourselves that. So self-compassion is simply speaking to yourself with that same kind of kindness. And the self-compassion website has a lot of resources to kind of go into that too, if you would like some more there. So the key to happiness in this current pandemic is to have low expectations. Lower, nope, even lower. There you go. So even with self-care, you can set that bar pretty low and then inch it up as you have time and what works when you find things that work for you. And my last little cartoon for the evening is this one, because I've been avoiding newspapers now because, again, that kind of COVID fatigue. So I love this one. Have you seen the paper today? No, I can't. It's too depressing. No, I mean this paper. You're doing great. So I wanted to just leave everybody with that funny little message. So avoid the other papers if you can and want to, and think about this little paper. And that is it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hayes. I love that presentation. I'm winning some days at pandemic bingo and sometimes not so much, and that's okay, but I just keep thinking about it. So thanks so much for real, because I have the same attitude towards when someone starts to talk about self-care. It's almost like a gag reflex for social workers, and having something real that you can put in your back pocket and use, I just love it. So thank you so much again for that. Before I introduce Lisa, I just want to remind you that the panelists are providing general information only. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, call 911. If you're looking for mental health services in your area, please call 211. And also, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you might have to wake it up a little bit, but you will see at the bottom of your Zoom screen that there's a Q&A. You can ask questions, and when the panelists are done, if there are any questions, and we do have time, we will try to go to those questions. So if anybody does have any they would like to ask the three panelists, then please put those forward, and we'll try to take care of those before the end of the evening. So now I'd like to introduce Lisa Caricato. Lisa is also a member of Local 684. She's with the Canadian Mental Health Association unit. We have lots of talent in 684. And Lisa is a dedicated and passionate mental health professional with nearly 20 years experience in the field. She spent the last 16 years as an employee of the Canadian Mental Health Association of Sault Ste. Marie, working in a variety of programs doing direct client care with adults and families affected with mental illness. Currently, Lisa is an experienced mental health educator delivering workshops and presentations and certified training in the community. She's a certified trainer in the following: Safe Talk with Living Works Canada, providing workshops on suicide alertness; Assist Master Trainer with Living Works Canada, certified to teach applied suicide intervention skills; Mental Health First Aid for Adults with the Mental Health Commission of Canada; and Nonviolent Crisis Intervention for the Crisis Prevention Institute; Living Life to the Full, a CBT-based program with CMHA; and Mental Health Works. So please welcome Lisa.
Thank you very much, Tara, and hello, brothers and sisters. I am happy to be here today. Hopefully my screen is up and running. Okay, so I want to talk to you today about suicide prevention. And it is a subject that a lot of people have difficulty with. And for many years, it's a subject that people really stayed away from talking about. But I really want to change your view on that, because being able to talk about suicide is one of the ways that we can prevent it. Most suicides can be prevented. And the way we can prevent them is by teaching people skills in how to recognize what it looks like and teaching them how to have a direct conversation about it. So I want to spend a few moments just talking to you about Safe Talk, which is suicide alertness for everyone. It's a 3-hour training that teaches people how to identify someone who might be having thoughts of suicide. And it teaches them how to ask directly and where to link them to more supports in the community. And I want to ask you to think about training that you have as people working in any setting, really, because most people have training in first aid and CPR. We really accept that in our workplaces, in our communities, that we have a lot of folks who are trained in first aid and CPR. It's really important to have people around us that have this training to help in emergency situations, right? But we don't often think about people having training in mental health emergencies, around suicide intervention. And we need to change that, because it's very common for people to have thoughts of suicide. And we can't leave it up to people who work in the social work field or people work in mental health, counseling, that kind of thing. We have to actually ask more people in our community to get involved and get some basic training that are willing to help folks out, people like who have first aid and CPR. And so there are lots of underreported or unreported suicides in our community. It's 5 to 25%. I'm not going to get into statistics, but we lose about 4,000 Canadians every year to suicide, way more than we have to. It's about 20 a day in Canada. And it's the second leading cause of death of our young people ages 15 to 24. So it's important to know and understand that, and also know and understand that it's very common for people to have thoughts of suicide, that many people have had thoughts of suicide, and also that anyone can have those thoughts. So how do we help people? Well, we can teach people skills in recognizing what that looks like, because we all have known someone who has had thoughts of suicide, whether they've told us or not. We all know someone. And so we want to teach people what that looks like so we can help them, okay? So suicide, or a Safe Talk is a program that is taught around the world. It's standardized, and it teaches a lot of really helpful skills that can help people stay safe. Okay, we teach it to community members, we teach it to students, doctors, nurses, firefighters, military, really athletes, anyone over the age of 15 who wants to learn some basic skills in helping with suicide. We do a program where we train athletes in Safe Talk. I've trained hundreds and hundreds of athletes now, both in the OHL, in the NOJHL, at Sioux College and Algoma University. And anytime I do the training, the feedback always is, I wish I had this sooner. I could have helped a friend. I now know what I can do. I have a friend that is struggling, and thank you, I can help them. So it really is a great training tool to help people understand, first of all, what it looks like and how to intervene. I'm not going to get into how we're certified trainers. You have to be certified to teach it. But the first thing that Safe Talk does is it teaches people that when someone is thinking about suicide, they are often looking for people to help them. They give what we call invitations to talk about suicide. So we teach people to look for those invitations, how to recognize them. And then we teach them how to have a brief, direct conversation about what they've seen and asking directly about suicide. And then we teach them where in the community there are further help and support. So it is very much like CPR and first aid, because when you learn CPR and first aid, if someone's collapsed in the parking lot, well, what do? You go and check them. You see if they're conscious. If they're not, you prepare them and you start preparing, you do CPR on them until the ambulance comes, right? And so that's basically what we do with Safe Talk. We teach someone what it looks like when they're having thoughts, how to ask directly, and then where we can bring them for further help. So we do talking as trainers, we have videos, and we give the participants time to practice the talk steps, okay? So the talk steps, really, it's very simple: tell, ask, listen, keep safe. I'm not going to get into this. I know we're running out of time, but it is evaluated. It is evidence-based. It's used all over the world. And I know myself, in doing this training, I always have people contact me after and telling me how they've had a chance to help someone. So people do have the chance to use it. And I do want to also say that talking about suicide really is the only way to help prevent it, but also talking about it sometimes, if people are having thoughts of suicide, can really be triggering. So I want to remind people that if you are having thoughts of suicide, or if you know someone that's having thoughts of suicide, please call Crisis Services Canada or get in touch with your local crisis center. It really is important. When we do the Safe Talk training, I always have an assist-trained caregiver with me who's present at the training, who is there to provide support if someone needs it. So it's another part of the training that provides safety. And there's also a place on the feedback form where we ask someone, if they do want to talk about their own thoughts of suicide, to write a note to the trainer, and a way we can get in touch with them, and then we do. So it's another piece too that helps. And I've had notes before where I've had to get in touch with people. And so it is really a great basic first step training that teaches people how to recognize what it looks like, how to ask directly about suicide, and then where in the community people can get further help. So I thank you for your time. I don't want to take up too much time, because I know I know we want to leave time for questions.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing those very important resources and learning opportunities for additional training so we can support each other, especially in these difficult times where there's so much uncertainty, so much additional stress, different types of stress as we've seen this evening, and really emphasizing that it's okay to talk about it and that it's okay to have those uncomfortable conversations because there is a greater good to it. And just before we open it up to the questions, I just wanted to remind you that these panelists are providing general information only. And if you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please call 911. And for local mental health services, please call 211.
So we have a couple questions coming in. And so one question is, how do we differentiate between self-care and being selfish? And self-care not being a reason we are not there for others? I'm not sure if we want to, who we want to throw that to start with. Anybody?
I'll say something quickly. Self-care is not selfish. It's actually necessary. And I think we spend far too much time taking care of our vehicles, our homes. We make appointments to get oil changes. We do the things we need to take care of ourselves or to take care of our homes and our vehicles, right? So they last longer so we can keep them. We need to actually invest that time in ourselves. We need to make sure that we are spending time every day doing something that helps us to feel joy, that helps us to feel cared for. And it's not selfish, it's necessary. Just think about it like your car change, like all those other, your oil changes, like the things you're doing to take care of everything else. You need that for yourself.
I see Dr. Hayes and Dr. Barrett also nodding. Would either of you like to add to Lisa's comments? And thank you for those, Lisa.
I think I agree 100% with what Lisa said. I don't know if I have anything else to add, but I think that's the way a lot of us have been trained. I know in medicine we're trained that our patient comes first, and it's like that whole old adage though about the oxygen mask. You can't be helping people if you don't help yourself first. A burned out person who can't work is not going to help anybody, and you're certainly not going to help your family. So I think, you know, a lot of this is sort of old school thoughts about how we should get through our world. And I think we're finding, especially at a time like now, if you don't care for yourself, you're just, you know, as we all say, you're not going to be there for anyone else. So.
And I would just add, I think the differentiating factor would be time. Also, you know, if you're spending 8 hours a day, maybe you could call that selfish. You know, if you're spending and you're still meeting all the other obligations as well as carving out time for yourself. That might be the little factor in between.
Thank you, everyone. This question is very specific to Northern Ontario and some of the experiences we've had. It's sort of lengthy. I'm just going to try to put it together a bit. So the person that submitted it says that they have a daughter who has mental health issues long before the pandemic, and things certainly aren't helping. Locally, they've had some not so good experience and difficulties with the system. They would like to get back to reaching out for help, but how do they do that within our communities? So I know that that's been service in Northern Ontario is always a challenge. So maybe, and we don't know the age of the daughter. So perhaps given everybody's experience, if each of you would like to respond to a suggestion for this member on maybe where to start might be helpful, if that's okay.
I guess
thank you.
I'm sorry. So for under 18, Algoma Family Services, and right now they can do what they call a single therapy session. So you can call and get booked into the next available slot. They're usually within about 2 weeks or so. And we are still doing those by telephone and or by OTN, so telehealth, so we can do it this way also. So that is one option if under 18.
I guess I'll go next. I think family physician is a good place to start too, if they have regular visits, along with getting support. But I also want to just add too, for the parent, sometimes when you're a parent and you're dealing with all the things that we're dealing with, along with a child who's having some struggles, a reminder to that parent that they need to, take care of themselves, and they may need some help too. So if they work for a place that has employee assistance to access those benefits, or access our walk-in counseling, which we have in partnership with many agencies, and you can call on Monday and get a virtual appointment on Tuesday. So I just wanted to speak to that. I work in adult, but that's was making me think. I have some family support background, so that was making me think of that.
Yes, Lisa, that's 100% the truth. And really what I was going to say too is that I understand completely how frustrating it can be for families when you have a child with mental health problems. It's a very difficult process. And I know that there's huge gaps in the system, and it's heartbreaking because of all the people we should be providing the best mental health care for. It's our children. They're our future, but that's just not the case, unfortunately, with funding. So just a couple things. If you've been frustrated in the past, I mean, sometimes it's helpful to sit down and really figure out what it is that you're frustrated about, and figure out if there's another way to go about things. I think sometimes if we keep doing the same thing over and over again and it's not working, we need to step back and think about doing things in another way. And that's where I agree with Lisa, that maybe looking at what can I do myself to try to create, as best as I can in these difficult times, the emotional climate that supports my child's mental health. And I'm not trying to be judgmental here, and I totally understand how difficult that is. And that's where the self-care 100% is important. Children are attached to us via mirror neurons in our brains and all kinds of ways that they read how we are feeling and our frustration levels. And if we don't sort of look to ourselves and see, is there any way I can calm some of this down? It is very difficult because children know how you're feeling. I think too, to think about, again, going back to, like, if you've had problems before, is really sort of writing down and figuring out what the problem was. And when you do go to get some help, maybe just try to, in a very sort of calm way, try to go through the difficulties, because I think sometimes we get so frustrated that we present ourselves in a way that our frustration comes out so much, and it's when we're sort of so frustrated we can't be clear in what we're trying to say, and we're sort of still fixated on the things that went wrong in the past. So again, I'm not trying to be judgmental at all in this, because I totally understand. I've dealt with many families where there's been a lot of frustrating experiences. So I know this feels like I'm putting a lot onto the shoulders of the parent, but sometimes if we take some control in our own way, it makes us feel a little bit less powerless. If we start to think, okay, what can I do for self-care? Or can I just go through what happened before and just sort of change it up in my head and sort of figure out what happened? So I don't know if that's helpful, but those are just some thoughts that I have.
Thank you. And we have one last question. And before we go to the last question, after the question, we're just going to touch base with each of the panelists and the board members for kind of a final comment. So in order to kind of keep it, I realize my mistakes, I'm learning as I go. We'll go Dr. Barrett, Dr. Hayes, Lisa, then Ken, then Nat, and then I'll close it off, okay? So we all know where we are in the order. So thank you. So the last question is actually how someone can access Safe Talk. And I'm going to send this one to Lisa, but before I do, I just want to say that we have been in conversations, the board members have been in conversations. We acknowledge that this is something that we want to see our members have access to. And right now it's a little bit of a challenge, but we are looking at something like, and don't, we're still working on how this will roll out with Lisa, but sponsoring so many spots in Safe Talk presentations when they're happening in the 4 service regions that our members will be able to access. So we're still working on that process. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have time because it's not really necessary and safe to be presenting yet. But I'm gonna, in general, for anyone listening, Lisa, or in other regions, if you can also share what happens and how to access Safe Talk, that would be great.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I realized that after I started talking. So you can go on to the LivingWorks website and you can look up training in your area. So certified trainers, you can type in the area you're from and it will give you trainers that are available to do it. So you could also email me, my email contact. I think Tara's sending out information, so you could email me, email or call me. I'm happy to chat with you about delivering it. I've trained almost 2,000 people in the years that I've been doing it from in Algoma region. And so I do a lot of the training and I really enjoy it, and anyone who takes it finds it to be very valuable because it's something that it not only teaches about recognizing thoughts of suicide, but it also teaches people to recognize, just if someone looks like they're having difficulty, that it's okay to ask them if they're okay. So it really helps people understand that a little bit better. But yeah, so looking up trainers on the LivingWorks website is one way, or contacting me by email, and I can connect you with someone in your area that might be able to deliver it if it's not in this area.
Thank you. And we'll start with like just a final wrap up or any thoughts that each panelist would like to add. So Elizabeth, Dr. Barrett, if you'd like to go ahead.
I almost didn't unmute again. I just want to say that, first of all, I'm very honored you asked to include me in this evening's talk, and very honored to be co-presenting with such amazing speakers. Thank you. I think the only thing I would like to say is sort of just to repeat that I think we need to accept that we're in a very difficult situation, that we don't have an end in sight, and that it's okay to feel. And I think that's just really what I want everyone to take home, that any of these reactions is normal and not unexpected. And today is one day, tomorrow's a new day. So if today's a day when you just can't cope and you need to go to bed early, or you need to do whatever you need to do, tomorrow's a new day.
Exactly. I love that. Sometimes you just need a timeout to reset and recharge, and that's okay. So do whatever you can in order to balance that and carve out that time. And it's not selfish. It's actually healthy. It's healthy to go to bed early. It's healthy to, turn off all the news. It's healthy to take a break. So that's, I think, my kind of main message from today too. And thank you also for inviting me. I mirror the same sentiments, that it's wonderful to be able to speak with such lovely presenters. And to my brothers and sisters, I love that saying.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to say thank you too. I was really excited at the opportunity to do this. I was excited to hear once I saw the topics. So glad you're doing this. The information that we got tonight was so important and a good reminder to all of us that we really do need to kind of take stock of ourselves and understand that like I say in one of my trainings I do, sometimes good enough is good enough, right? And to be gentle and kind to ourselves, and to remind people that to get the help and support that they need. Plain and simple. We go see a doctor if we have an ache or a pain that's bothering us for more than a couple of days, right? That's kind of what most people would do. If you have something that's bothering you, something that's preventing you from living your life or doing the things that are important to you, and it's lasting for more than about 2 weeks, talk to someone about it. Seek professional care. That it's a good thing to do that. It's being proactive. Might not be anything, might be something, but you know, anything that lasts longer than 2 weeks and anything that's interfering with your ability to live your life or do the things that are important, take care of yourself. We need to remember that, and to use not only those professional supports, but your social supports. You know, talk to your spouse, talk to your friends, talk to your dog if you have to, but talk about it. Really, really important reminder for all of us.
Ken?
Thanks. My thoughts would be that of gratitude to everyone who's shown up tonight. I had a lot of validation on some of the feelings that I've had going through this, and I'm pretty sure I need a break. But I thank everyone. I thank the two sisters on the board with me and all the other board members that have shown up. I learned a lot, and I'm very grateful that it's being recorded so we can share it with everybody, because I have some friends and family I want to show this to. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to the panelists. Thanks to Chris, our support. And again, gratitude and appreciation. Thank you very much.
I have to agree with Ken. I'm so excited that we were able to offer this, not just to our region, but we were able to expand it a little bit further throughout the province, which to me, there was clearly a need to have this type of conversation. There was a need for us to feel, like I said, a little bit more normal, that, okay, everything I've experienced, all those funny belly feelings I've been having through all this, and the swimmy feeling in your head and all those fun things, that it's okay and it's normal and you're not the only one that's feeling this. And it kind of makes you feel better about everything, the chaos surrounding us. And I love that Lisa said, you know, even talk to your dog. You know, your pet's the one person you can confide in, and they won't tell anyone. So it doesn't matter what you confide them with. And that's always been, it's always a special piece of pet relationships. So it doesn't really matter. You just reach out. It's so important. And many are so uncomfortable in mental health discussions in general. And we need to push out of that comfort zone, because the good outweighs that uncomfortable feeling that lasts maybe 5 minutes. So on that, thank you everybody for taking time for yet another Zoom meeting, taking time away from your families for this. It shows that it is important, and I hope that with this being recorded, we can share it far and wide and spread the word, spread the message that it's okay to feel like you are in a blender. It's okay as long as you don't live in the blender. So thank you to everybody.
I just want to start by just a quick housekeeping or another piece around the resources. So I have the emails of all the attendees. So yes, if the presenters can send me your links, I'll put it together and can send those out as well to the registered attendees. That would be great. I would appreciate that. And Lisa, your contact information as well, I can put on there. I know that email that you use for work. So I'll do that as well and put it together for everybody. And I want to, huge gratitude to the presenters, the panelists that came in tonight. We have amazing expertise in Region 6, and to tap into your skills and knowledge, I'm just so grateful, and provide that information to our members. So thank you again so much, and to our attendees. And really importantly to Ken and Nat. Ken's coming off, I think, working 7 in a row. He's still in his uniform. And, you know, he's here, and we had a board meeting last night till 9:30 again. So the work that they're doing, and especially to support this, which is so important to all of us, I really appreciate it. And our local leadership who were brave enough to bring this up to us, and our equity leaders who supported us in bringing this forward to the membership. We have an amazing leadership team in 6, and just love you all. I think Nat was doing the little heart. We love you all, and thank you so much for making this happen. And everyone, have a good night, be safe, and do whatever you need to do to take care of yourselves, little or big. Thank you.